Are you playing ranked the wrong way? I don't mean are you missing too many shots or are you playing with bad positioning. I mean, do you have the wrong idea of what the current ranked system is actually asking you to do? Because you might already be a good enough player to reach ranks higher than what you've hit before, but you just don't understand the system. Well, with Season 21 getting started soon, now's a great time to reset your mental and reframe what is required to rank up in Apex Legends, and we're going to do that with straight up math. Sup y'all, my name's Wheaties, I love analyzing Apex Legends, and let's just get right into it. So for starters, I'll list all the relevant info on how we gain points in ranked as well as entry costs for your rank. Keep in mind that each rank also requires a different level of RP to climb their ranks. Getting out of silver will require 1200 RP, gold will take 2800, plat will take 4800, diamond requires 7200, and masters will require 10,000. That's cumulative, so you don't have to literally gain another 7200 RP in diamond to get to masters. Each rank's RP requirement essentially increases by 400 and the entry cost increases by 20 each rank starting with silver, so even if you're performing just as well in a higher rank, it'll still take longer for you to rank up. Your kills are worth more the higher you place, and you also get extra credit for eliminating players that are higher ranked than you, but for the sake of this video we're going to ignore that second part as it's not something that's in our control, unless of course you're intentionally queuing with someone who's a higher rank than you, and even then you're still not really in control of the ranks of the other players in the lobby. As you can see, losing games with no points becomes far more punishing as you rank up due to the increased entry costs, but you'd be surprised how forgiving it really is, and to illustrate this we'll go through some thought experiments, but first we need to make a few educated assumptions. Assumption number 1, the average KD of all players is 1.0 or very close to it. We can assume that because every time one player gets a kill, another player dies. That's pretty obvious, but what this means is that the net kills to deaths across the entire Apex population ends up being pretty close to zero. As a whole population, we are all dying as much as we're killing. This is thrown off slightly by the fact that the winning team in any game doesn't actually die, but given how many people play this game, the number should still be pretty close to 1 anyways for the entire population. Since players get points for assists and kills that they did not participate in, we will have to make some sort of note of that. We could say that each team's average KD should be close to 3.0, meaning each team is averaging less than 3 kills per game between all 3 players on a team. For simplicity's sake, we're just going to say each team is averaging 3 KP. Assumption number 2 is that a player who has reached the rank that represents their skill level will begin to perform averagely. That is to say that their KD will begin to approach 1.0 and their chances of landing in any of the 20 available placements will approach 5% for each placement. So an average player in lobbies of their skill level will die in 20th place just as often as they die in 10th or 15th or win in 1st. Because once we've reached lobbies where all the players are roughly equivalent in skill and decision making, placement becomes more a matter of chance than anything else. I know some people will say that this is unrealistic, and obviously this won't be true for each individual game, but it is reasonable to assume that this will be true over a long enough period of time because the highs and lows should even out. The best way to explain how this could be true is to kind of look at how crazy it would be if it wasn't true. So let's say that we had a truly balanced lobby. Assume that every player is equally as good as the next, everyone gets the same quality of loot, none of the POIs are better than any of the others, and everyone is otherwise on equal footing. If it were possible to get 20 teams of players that were actually balanced like this and we had them play a very large number of games, each team's win rate would approach 5%, or 1 out of 20 games. Now there would still be somebody who was ever so slightly ahead, but if these teams are truly balanced and the game is truly balanced, then there won't be any clear favorites over enough games. So to reiterate, assumption number 2 is that a player who has reached the rank that represents their skill level will begin to perform averagely. Their stats might not reflect that, because obviously they had to climb through some ranks, but if you were able to isolate just the games that they spent in the rank that they are actually average in, we will usually find this to be true. Assumption number 3 is that the system is already mostly settled, so we're saying this is late season. Now this is important because it allows us to assume that the players in each rank are roughly equal in skill, with very few of them actually climbing at this point. I don't want to mess with the early season because you literally have Preds that are in gold, like it's just a whole mess. There's not really a good way to calculate it. It just adds too many variables, so we're just going to consider the late season where there's a little more control in the environment. Now let's do a couple thought experiments. So test number 1 is a player who performs averagely throughout all of their games. This imaginary player has a KD of 1.0, they are equally likely to place in any given placement, and we will also assume that their teammates perform averagely as well. This means we're getting about 3 KP per game on average. Now I know somebody is going to say that their teammates are below average, but in reality over time we're going to have games where we carry as well as games that we get carried. And our teammates will average out over a large enough number of games. If it's really true that you're carrying your teammates in most of your games, That's less a reflection of the skill level of your teammates and more a reflection of the fact that you're probably just not in the rank that you really should be in. From 20th through 14th, our average points per game will be 30 per game from our KP, which by the way means you should be consistently gaining points up until gold even if you're performing slightly below average. From 13th through 11th, we start getting some points from placement and our points become 35. 10th and 9th, it becomes 46. And in gold, that would be the point where we start gaining points due to the entry cost, meaning you're gaining points in half your games as long as you're performing averagely. In 8th and 7th, you gain 56 points. In 6th, it's 66. In 5th, it's 93. 4th is 103. In 3rd, it's 124. In 2nd, it's 161. And in 1st, it's 203. That's 1,269 points over 20 games. And in gold, we're paying 40 per game to be there. So that means we're gaining 469 points over 20 games in gold, or 23.45 points per game on average. That also means we're gaining 3.45 points per game in plat. This does not necessarily mean that Plat 4 is truly the average rank, but it does kind of hint at it. And I do think a lot of us suspected that it was at Plat 4 because that is the largest rank in the game outside of Rookie 4. Now for our second test subject, we're going to use me. As of the writing of the script, my stats are as follows. Out of 310 ranked games, I've won 27. I've placed top 5 in 96 of those. My ranked KD is 1.69, and I've had 397 assists. That's a first place rate of 8.71%, which is slightly above the average. A top 5 placement rate of 30.96%, but since 8.71% of those are first place finishes, we'll just say that we get 5th through 2nd about 22.5% of the time, which is still slightly above the average that we would expect of 20%. Since we don't know how often each of those placements occur, we'll divide that 22.5% up between the 4 of them and say that each placement happens 5.625% of the time. We're getting 1.28 assists per game, so that's effectively 2.97 KP per game at least. We're going to estimate that I get at least 1 participation kill per game, and for simplicity's sake, we'll say we're getting 3.5 KP per game just to simplify the calculations. We don't have to worry that much about the KP of our teammates, as our assists should take those into account, and there's a chance that I get way more participation kills than what I've assumed here, but I'm confident that we're pretty close, as we would assume that if I had average teammates that they'd be getting 1 kill per game, putting our max KP average at 3.69, which is slightly above the average that we're estimating right now. I'm not sure how to best estimate our average placement in other ranks, as I don't have that information available for myself, so we'll just have to assume they're all equally likely to occur for me. So we'll say that I'm just as likely to die in dead last as I am to make it to 6th. The average RP we'd gain from placement would be 7 points per game, and RP from kills averages out to 37.33 points per game. Let's round down and call that 44 RP gained per game when we place below top 5. That's not counting our entry cost, of course, and currently I'm in plat, so I'm losing an average of 16 points every time I place below top 5, and given the percentages we know for our top 5 placement, we'll have to assume that each individual placement below top 5 has a 4.6% chance of occurring, just slightly below the average. By the way, this is implying that I spend a significant amount of time in ranks where I was above average. Which is true in my case. I started grinding ranked probably a month after the split first started, so at least half of these games, probably more, were below plat, at a time when the ranks were pretty well settled already. The fact that it's now approaching 5% tells us that I'm probably getting closer to my true rank, but of course we can't be too sure as we're just estimating here. You could also say that when we play 100 games, we lose RP just over 69% of the time, and that loss is somewhere around 1,104 points if we play 100 games. This is not counting the RP that we're gaining yet, by the way. Whenever we place in 5th, we gain 56 points from KP on average and 45 points from placement for a total of 101 points. In 4th, KP is the same, but we gain 55 points from placement instead, netting us 111 points. With our entry cost in plat, that means I'm gaining 41 points in 5th and 51 points in 4th. In 3rd, we get 70 points from placement and 63 from KP for a total of 133 points. That's 73 points gained in plat. In 2nd, we get 95 points from placement and 77 from KP for a total of 172 or 112 gained after entry cost. And in 1st, we get 125 from placement and 91 from KP for a total of 216 or 156 after entry cost is subtracted. We get that about 8.71% of the time too, as we said before. This is enough to cover all of our losses actually just by getting first place this much, netting us a gain of 1,359 points over the course of 100 games. We're gaining 1,558 points from our 5th through 2nd place finishes over those games, meaning that after 100 games, we should be gaining 1,813 points. If we're able to maintain that performance in Diamond, then factoring in the additional 20 RP cost per game, over the course of 100 games, I will lose 187 RP. Now that's a pretty dramatic shift. We went from gaining pretty steadily in Platinum to basically being hard stuck Diamond 4. Even assuming that we're able to play just as well against better players, which is not likely to be the case. Diamond lobbies are harder, so my performance is surely going to decrease, meaning my stats will as well, so it's likely that I'll be losing a lot more points than what we're calculating right now. This is why when you look at the rank distribution, everything above Diamond 4 is so tiny. It's way easier to get to Diamond than it is to rank up inside of it. Even being better than most of the other Diamond players isn't actually enough to climb. You'd have to really stand out and really sink the hours in if you wanted to climb there. This also means, though, that if you're capable of getting out of Diamond 4, then you are capable of getting Masters, but unless you're quite exceptional, it becomes a really time-consuming task. By the way, this is why they removed the cap on RP gained from KP back in Season 13 Split 1. I'm not going to do the math here, but it was quite literally almost impossible for anybody to get out of Plat 4. But mathematically speaking, it was still relatively easy for people to get out of gold. So anyways, this does give me some hope, as it means that if I'm able to get just a little bit better, or maybe 3-stack more consistently, then I do have a chance of climbing in Diamond. But I'd sure like to cut down on how long this takes. I mean, I still want to play pubs and stuff too, and not have to grind ranked all season long just to get that Masters badge that I've never had, so we gotta figure something out here. So let's make a few observations here on ways that I can improve and possibly reach Masters. First, it's obvious that we're losing RP on average whenever we place below top 5, so obviously we don't want to place below top 5. But that's kind of a moot point. I mean, playing better obviously means we get more points. So instead, I would like to present a bit of a ridiculous scenario to you. Let's say that our average player gets none of their kills whenever they die below 5th place, and all of their kills happen in the top 5. In order for this to happen, they would have to get 0 kills in 15 games and 4 kills in each of their top 5 games. From 20th through 14th, we gain nothing. That's negative 60 with the entry cost in Plat. Actually, our teammates got some kills, so we got 20 points per game, meaning we're losing 40 per game, or 280 points over the course of 7 games. From 13th through 11th, we're losing 35. From 10th through 9th, we're losing 26 per game. 8th and 7th, we're losing 16 per game. And in 6th, we're losing 6 points. In total, between these 15 games, we're losing 475 points. Over the course of 100 games, that would be 2,375 points lost. That sounds bad, right? Starting from 5th place, assuming we're getting 4 kills on our own and our teammates are average, meaning they each get 1 kill per game, we're getting about 6 KP per game. We're going to call it 6 just for simplicity's sake and to see what happens. In 5th, that means we get 45 points from placement and 96 from KP for 141 total for a net gain of 81 points once we take in the entry cost. In 4th, that becomes 91. In 3rd place, we get 70 from placement, 108 from KP, leaving us with 118 in gains. In 2nd, that's 95 from placement, 132 from KP for a total of 167. And in 1st, 125 from placement and 156 from KP for a total of 221. All in all, we're gaining 678 in 5 games, which means we're gaining 203 total over 20 games. Now we're gaining 1,015 over the course of 100 games for an average of 10.15 points per game in Plat lobbies. If we were in gold, that'd be just over 30 points, and this is a near 7-point improvement on what we were doing before, so clearly we benefit from playing for the late game. It may seem like a small amount, but that small amount helps a lot over the course of an entire season. And in fact, if you've never hit Plat before, but you have relatively average stats, you could hit Platinum for the first time, given about 160 games. But I'm sure we'd like to see even more improvement on that. Now you may be thinking, Wheaty's 6 KP in top 5 is pretty normal, that actually happens a lot. And you'd be exactly right. You could say that this math indicates that fighting isn't very risky, all things considered. I mean, if we can wipe 2 squads in a quarter of our games each and literally do nothing for the other 75% and still gain points, then why wouldn't we just play for those explosive 300, 500 point games? Why not just fight everything? Mathematically speaking, we're better off putting ourselves in a position where we might get no kills if it makes it more likely that we end up in the top 5 with above average kills. Again, this is assuming that you are performing averagely, or in other words, that you are an average fighter in whatever rank that you're in. It's pretty unlikely that you're going to die more than 15 times out of 20 games without getting any KP. Assuming, of course, that you're not a silver player in Pred lobbies or something ridiculous like that. So far, 3 things are fairly obvious from our calculations. 1, fighting is heavily favored in this system. Sure, higher placement matters a lot, but as we discussed, you're better off fighting as much as you can. It's literally better to die with no kills 15 games in a row with low placement and make up for it with a few decent games than it is to be more consistent. And if you're able to be consistent as well as play for those above average games, that's even better. 2, since this is all done with solo queue in mind and assuming that your teammates are performing averagely, which should be true over time, it means that we see a dramatic boost when duo queuing or 3 stacking, assuming that we play with friends that are as good as us and all of us are above the average. In fact, if you're 3 stacking, you can nearly double your gains. And 3, this system is fairly forgiving until Plat, at which point the higher entry costs start to make things challenging for the average player. This isn't even taking the tougher players into account either, and Diamond is an entirely different story. This is of course why cheating is so rampant this season, as once you get up to those ranks, it's only the people who are performing exceptionally well who can actually climb, even if it's really slow, and so people often resort to cheating. Again, I'm not giving any tips on how to actually play the game, how to fight better, how to perform better in-game. We'll make some videos on that in the future, but none of this means that you should just ape everything as hard as you can. Especially because you're not in control of the placement of the rest of the lobby. Even in Diamond, you can still see half the lobby dead by the end of Ring 1. Plus, the longer the game goes on without you fighting, the less kills are available. You're mathematically better off fighting off drop, taking every fight that you can reasonably expect to win and reset from, and hoping that you make it to the top 5. Your big top 5 finishes will substantially outweigh your bottom 15 losses in the long run, but the games where you consistently make it to higher placement with few kills are unlikely to outweigh the number of games that you spend losing RP if you choose to play too passively. People don't think about this, but every fight that you take has an element of chance to it. Sure, you can consistently start your fights off with an advantage. Maybe you're a really good entry fragger or you're really good at finding weapons off drop, but there's always a chance that somebody gets a crazy one clip or hits a great sky nade or there's always going to be an element of chance to it. So your goal shouldn't be to avoid risk altogether. Your goal should really be to tip the odds in your favor, accepting the fact that there's always going to be some random chance in there, and really take the initiative in fights. If you're avoiding taking fights because you think it's too risky, you're just statistically wrong. The truth is that it's too risky not to start fights, because if you're not starting them, somebody else is, and they're going to have the advantage over you the majority of the time. So anyways, back to the numbers. If you're well above average, you certainly can climb to Diamond solo, but you're much better off finding people of similar skill to play with instead. As we said before, this has the potential to double your gains over time, but if you really want to rank up, really climb, there's only one way to do it. And that's getting better at fighting. Get used to fighting with suboptimal loot, get better at entry fragging, focus on the mid to close range weapons that are better able to clean up kills faster, play super aggressive legends like Horizon, Mad Maggie, Bangalore, Bloodhound, anything that can be played super aggressive, grab more nades, just fight better and fight harder. And if you literally have 19 bad games with 0 kills in a row, it doesn't matter because the statistically likely one explosive game at the 20th will make up for all of it. To illustrate that, let's take our average player one more time and say that they had 0 kills for 19 games and 1 explosive first place finish. And in fact, let's make it harder. Let's assume that our teammates are well below average, that they're getting half the kills that they should be. That would mean they're getting 10 kills in 20 games. And let's assume they get all 10 of those kills in that first place finish that we grab. We spend 7 games losing 60 RP each for a total loss of 420, 3 games losing 55 each for a total of 165, 2 games losing 50 each for 100 lost, 2 games losing 40 each for 80 lost. In 6th, we lose 30 points, in 5th, we lose 15 points, in 4th, we lose 5 points, in 3rd, we just barely gain 10 points, and in 2nd, we gain 35 points. That's a total loss of 770 points over 19 games, assuming none of our teammates get kills, which again is statistically unlikely. Your teammates are probably going to perform better than that on average. Now let's say that we have one explosive win. I'm talking the squad gets 30 kills and wins it, which is difficult, but it's entirely doable. In 1st, we gain 125 points from placement and 780 points from kills for a total of 905 points. Minus 60 for the entry cost in Plat, and minus 770 from our other losses in the 19 other games, and we end up with a gain of 75 points. That's an average of 3.75 points per game. But again, this is an unlikely scenario. It's unlikely that our teammates are going to play that poorly. What's more likely is that they still get kills in every game. As we said before, dying in the bottom 15 with no kills while our teammates get kills leaves us with 475 points in total. In the other 4 placements, we end up with plus 17, plus 25, plus 46, and plus 79 for a total of 167, which so far amounts to us losing 303 points in those 19 games. Our first place game would have 22 kills, netting us 125 in placement and 572 points in KP, minus 60 for the entry cost for a total of 637. Meaning we gained 334 points in 20 games, or 16.7 RP per game, which is even better than what we were gaining before. And we're not actually doing better on average, we're just having one explosive game every 20 games and absolutely bombing out for 19 of them. By the way, this also means that we're only losing 3.3 points per game in Diamond while maintaining perfectly average stats. That's really not that far off from how much RP I was losing per game, and I have much better stats than this average player that we've invented. You can make it to Masters with enough time even as a solo player, and that's not an easy task by any means, but it's entirely possible. Of course, that is assuming that you can maintain that average performance in well above average lobbies, which isn't easy and is the primary reason that cheating is as rampant as it is in those lobbies, of course. It's also assuming that once you adopt this aggressive mindset that the system is requiring of you, that your stats don't improve. And to be honest, y'all, even if the system didn't favor it, playing aggressive is still the most effective way to play this game. It's generally better to be the team making the first move, fighting for the positioning that you want, and choosing legends and weapons that help you fight better. It is a lot easier to be active than it is to be reactive. So I'm going to take a guess and say that if you start playing this way and get better at being aggressive, you're eventually going to see your stats get better and your gains go even higher. So if you really want to rank up in this season, get a 3-stack of players as good as you and fight, fight, fight. Don't even worry about placement until you're actually in a position to win the game. Always play for that single explosive game, because one explosive win literally will outweigh 19 complete duds. Thanks for watching. If there's something that I got totally wrong, an assumption that I missed, or something that I just calculated incorrectly, blah blah blah, feel free to tell me about that in the comments. I'd love to know y'all's thoughts, and yep, I'll see y'all there.